By the winter of 1941, the Battle of the Atlantic had turned into a slow-motion disaster, one so vast and quiet that most people back home never fully grasped it. Britain wasn't losing from a single blow. It was bleeding out from 1,000 unseen cuts scattered across the freezing North Atlantic, where German U-boats hunted almost without fear. Every morning, the reports landing on the Admiralty's desks told the same chilling story. In June 1941 alone, over 310,000 tons of Allied shipping vanished beneath gray waves. By early 1942, that monthly toll would climb past 400,000 tons. Even Churchill later admitted that the U-boat threat was the one thing that truly frightened him, and the numbers explained why. Britain survived on imports. Nearly 70% of its food, plus oil, steel, aircraft components, ammunition, everything, crossed the Atlantic on civilian-crewed merchant ships. These sailors knew each voyage could end with them plunged into 4-degree water where hypothermia killed in minutes. The Royal Navy threw every destroyer and corvette it had into the fight, trying to guard convoys across the infamous mid-Atlantic Black Gap, the no-man's land beyond air cover where U-boats roamed freely. But courage wasn't the issue. The math was. Between 1939 and the end of 1941, the Royal Navy launched over 5,000 depth-charge attacks. Fewer than 100 submarines were confirmed destroyed, a success rate barely above 2%. 98 times out of 100, the U-boat got away, shaken but alive, ready to strike again. Admiral Karl Donitz understood this perfectly. If he could keep 300 operational submarines at sea, he believed he could sink ships faster than the Allies could replace them. By early 1942, that grim strategy seemed to be working. Worse, the Navy's main anti-sub weapon, the Mark 7 depth charge, was built on wishful thinking more than physics. It looked impressive when it detonated, but unless the explosion happened within 6 meters of a submarine's hull, the blast meant nothing. And in the vastness of the ocean, 6 meters was essentially point-blank range. The real killer flaw lay in A-Stick, Britain's sonar system. As an escort closed in on a target, the geometry of the sonar beam created a fatal blind spot. In the last, most crucial moments, within about 200 meters, the submarine simply vanished from the screen. That blind zone could last a full minute or more. A skilled U-boat commander could use that time to change depth, turn sharply, or slip away while the depth charges tumbled toward the spot where he had been, not where he was now. The hard truth became unavoidable. Almost every successful attack was luck, not accuracy. Meanwhile, rationing tightened at home. Bacon dropped to 4 ounces a week. Sugar, butter, meat, everything shrank. And still the ships went down. The carrier HMS Ark Royal and the battleship HMS Barham were lost within weeks of each other, the latter taking more than 800 men with her. If the Royal Navy didn't find a better weapon, one that could attack ahead of the escort while the sonar contact was still solid, Britain risked starving before American industry could turn the tide. What the Navy needed was something entirely new, something bold enough to break the math. Somewhere in London, an unconventional officer had already begun working on exactly that idea. Charles Frederick Good was not the sort of officer the Admiralty usually welcomed. Charles Frederick Good was not the sort of officer the Admiralty usually welcomed. Born in Manitoba in 1904 and trained as a physical chemist, he thought in equations and pressure curves rather than naval tradition. When war began, he joined the Royal Naval Volunteer Reserve and was assigned to HMS Vernon, the Navy's torpedo and mining school. Surrounded by officers who trusted old methods because they were old, Good quickly realized anti-submarine warfare had barely evolved since 1918. Where career sailors saw the depth charge as sacred doctrine, he saw a physics flaw waiting to be dismantled. If the enemy vanished in the sonar blind spot every time an escort moved in for the kill, then the weapon itself, not the sailors, was the problem. The answer wasn't better depth charges. It was abandoning the entire idea of dropping explosives behind a moving ship. His breakthrough came from an unlikely place: fireworks. Good had studied how certain pyrotechnic launchers used spigot mortars, simple rods that fired projectiles without a heavy gun barrel. The principle was beautifully efficient. A charge ignites at the base, the projectile leaps forward, and the launcher itself barely recoils. Lightweight, adaptable, and perfect for a ship's foredeck. By late 1940, Good and a small team in the Department of Miscellaneous Weapons Development, a name that captured both their creativity and their low status, sketched out what he called a forward-throwing anti-submarine weapon. Instead of rolling explosives off the stern, They would fire dozens of small bombs in an arc ahead of the ship, while sonar contact was still solid. No blind spot. No guesswork. The first reactions from senior officers were predictable. Skeptical, dismissive, even mocking. How would small bombs reach lethal depth quickly enough? Would the launchers damage the ship? Why replace a proven doctrine with a Canadian chemist's experiment? Critics also poked fun at the prototype's rotating drum mechanism. They joked it looked like a firework rack, the professor's toy, something more suited to holiday displays than naval combat. But what they missed was that Good had already solved their concerns mathematically. His key innovation was the contact fuse. Unlike depth charges exploding at preset depths, often in empty ocean, the new projectiles detonated only when they hit a submarine's hull. A hit meant destruction. A miss meant silence. The sub would have no warning. The bombs entered the water quietly. By early 1941, the weapon finally earned a name. Someone noticed the rows of protruding spigots resembled the quills of a hedgehog. The nickname stuck, and would soon become legendary. The genius of the Hedgehog wasn't in one invention, but in how every detail corrected a failure of conventional depth charge attacks. The launcher held 24 spigot mortars in 6 rows, angled forward about 45 degrees and slightly outward to create a wide pattern. Fired electrically in rapid pairs, all 24 bombs left the launcher in about 3 seconds, landing roughly 200 meters ahead of the ship. This changed everything. Escorts no longer had to race over the submarine and lose sonar contact. With Hedgehog, the crew tracked the target all the way through the attack, adjusting course until the final second. The submarine's desperate maneuvers were visible, not guessed. Each projectile carried about 16 pounds of torpex inside a 30-pound body, far smaller than a depth charge, but far more efficient because every explosion happened only on direct impact. No wasted detonations, no thunderous but useless blasts in empty water. The fuse mechanism itself was elegantly simple. A weighted striker held away from a detonator by a spring-loaded safety device, armed only on impact. The Hedgehog was ready to prove every skeptic wrong. The rest of the weapon's brilliance revealed itself only after the projectiles hit the water. As each bomb descended, a water-soluble washer slowly armed the striker. If it struck nothing, it simply drifted to the seabed inert. But if it hit a submarine's hull, the impact drove the striker into the detonator, triggering the charge directly against the pressure hull. That placement mattered more than raw explosive weight. A 16-pound torpex charge exploding on contact delivered more destructive force than a 300-pound depth charge detonating 10 meters away. The physics were unavoidable. Proximity beat payload every time. The Hedgehog's spread pattern further tipped the odds. 24 bombs splashed down across an elliptical zone roughly 40 by 60 meters, wide enough to absorb minor aiming errors and wide enough to catch a submarine shifting course during the weapon's flight. A U-boat trying to evade would have to avoid every single projectile. One hit was enough. Post-war analysis placed the chance of lethal damage at 94% if even one bomb made contact. By comparison, near misses from depth charges often produced only temporary or superficial harm. Then there was the psychological shock. Depth charges roared and rumbled long before they detonated. Crews knew when they were being hunted. Hedgehog bombs made no such announcement. They entered the water quietly. The first sound a submarine crew heard was the explosion that sealed their fate. By late 1941, theory finally met reality. The Admiralty authorized full operational trials, installing Hedgehog on a handful of escorts. HMS Westcott, a modified W-class destroyer, received hers in December. Within weeks, she would provide the proof no memo or technical report could match. Her target was U-581, a Type VIIC commanded by Captain Lieutenant Werner Pfeiffer. On February 2, 1942, while hunting convoy traffic southeast of the Azores, Westcott's Aztec operator picked up his boat at about 60 meters. Commander Ivan Bucket Pugh began his approach. This time, instead of racing over the target and losing contact, the crew armed the Hedgehog launcher on the foredeck while sonar held the submarine squarely in view. At the calculated moment, Pugh gave the order. 24 projectiles leapt skyward, fell ahead of the ship, and vanished beneath the surface. Seconds stretched in silence. Then, one sharp, clean detonation. A single hit tore open U-581's pressure hull. The submarine surged upward in an uncontrolled emergency ascent, fatally wounded. Westcott closed in and finished the job. The report reached the Admiralty in days. 1 salvo, 1 kill. The so-called professor's toy had achieved in minutes what thousands of depth-charge attacks rarely managed. Word spread quickly. Suspicion turned to demand. Commanders who once laughed at the odd-looking launcher now wanted one aboard their own ships. Production lines accelerated. Training expanded. By spring 1942, Hedgehog installations appeared on corvettes, frigates, and destroyers across the North Atlantic. The kill list grew. HMS Elisma destroyed U-252 in March. HMS Volunteer sank U-588 in April. HMS Viscount claimed U-661 in October. Each victory confirmed the same truth. A forward-throwing, contact-fused weapon outperformed stern-dropped depth charges by a margin too large to ignore. By early 1943, Hedgehog had become standard equipment, and its impact compounded rapidly. Escorts could now prosecute several contacts in a single battle instead of wasting time on prolonged, uncertain depth charge chases. When wolf packs attacked, escorts could respond with precision instead of blind bombardment. And then came the pivotal months, March to May 1943. March saw U-boats inflict over 600,000 tons of shipping losses. Admiral Donitz committed every submarine he could muster, convinced victory was still within reach. He was disastrously mistaken. April's sinkings dropped sharply. In May, the German submarine arm suffered the worst month in its history. 43 U-boats lost. The battle around convoy ONS-5 made the shift unmistakable. 40 U-boats attacked, but escorts sank 6 while losing 13 merchant ships. The exchange rate had flipped. Hedgehog wasn't the only factor. Radar, long-range aircraft, ultra-intelligence, and more escorts all played major roles. But the weapon solved the one tactical flaw nothing else could fix: the sonar blind spot. Remove the escape window, and U-boat survival collapsed. Depth charges shifted into secondary use. Hedgehog took center stage. Years later, surviving U-boat officers described 1942 as difficult, 1943 as devastating. Donitz withdrew his submarines from the North Atlantic that May, acknowledging tactical defeat. He would return with new technologies, but the momentum never came back. The device senior officers, once mocked as a fireworks contraption, had helped turn the tide of the Atlantic. Charles Goode's unconventional mind had reshaped a war. The change was felt even more sharply inside German submarines. Life within those narrow steel compartments bore no resemblance to the calm lines on an admiral's chart. U-boat crews, mostly young volunteers who had once believed in Donitz's promises of tonnage victory, now sensed the tide turning against them. By mid-1943, confidence had faded into something closer to resignation. The hunters had become the hunted. Captured diaries and post-war interviews revealed the psychological toll. Depth charges, terrifying as they were, followed a rhythm sailors learned to endure: the rising thrum of propellers, the splash of falling charges, the tense seconds as fuses armed. Men could brace themselves, shut bulkhead doors, or at least prepare mentally. Hedgehog erased that ritual entirely. Its bombs entered the water quietly, leaving no acoustic trace as they descended. The first sign of an attack was the explosion itself. No warning, no build-up, just a sudden blast against the hull. Survivors from damaged submarines recalled the silence before the impact as the most unnerving part. Without anticipation, there was no chance to act, no moment to steady themselves. It felt, as one later put it, like being struck by lightning in the dark. German intelligence struggled to understand these new attacks. Recovered fragments eventually revealed the contact fuse design, but knowing the mechanism did little to restore confidence. Tactics that once helped against depth charges, diving deeper, altering course abruptly, offered little help when escorts could track a submarine continuously and fire while still holding sonar contact. The only real defense was complete invisibility, yet Allied radar, HF/DF stations, and expanding air patrols made remaining unseen harder each month. As a result, U-boat commanders adopted increasingly defensive patrol patterns, submerged by day, surfacing only briefly at night to recharge batteries. These cautious routines sharply reduced their ability to strike at convoys. A submarine hiding from escorts could not simultaneously hunt them. Morale reflected this shift. In 1941 and early 1942, returning crews compared sinkings and celebrated successful patrols. By late 1943, boats limped back damaged, undermanned, and shaken. Patrols ended with survivors rather than victories. The average operational lifespan of a U-boat shrank from nearly a year to only a few months. Donuts attempted to counter the trend with new technology. The snorkel device, acoustic torpedoes, improved hull treatments, but none of it restored the earlier balance. Forward-throwing weapons, constant air coverage, and tighter convoy coordination had reshaped the battlefield. Loss rates that Donuts once assumed would hover around 2 to 3% per patrol soared to 10 to 20%. Germany simply could not replenish submarines and trained crews quickly enough. By 1944, veteran commanders were rare exceptions. New crews, rushed through training, faced defenses far stronger than those encountered by their predecessors. Hedgehog had not only altered tactics, it had changed who lived long enough to gain experience. When historians highlight May 1943 as the turning point, the month Donuts pulled back his wolf packs, they note that the shift resulted from many converging factors. Yet Hedgehog stands out as one of the clearest examples of how an unconventional idea, once dismissed, reshaped the strategic landscape. Charles Gedive received the Order of the British Empire in 1941, though the full significance of his work remained classified for years. He continued overseeing diverse projects, from degaussing systems to specialized landing craft equipment, but Hedgehog remained the achievement most closely associated with his name. It raised escort kill rates from near zero to something approaching consistent success. The results told the story plainly. From 1943 to war's end, Hedgehog-equipped escorts destroyed more than 50 confirmed U-boats. Its successor, Squid, a larger 3-barrel mortar with greater depth and accuracy, entered service in 1943 and proved even more effective. The United States Navy adopted the concept as well, installing the Mark 10 projector across its destroyer escort fleet. By 1945, forward-projecting weapons accounted for a major share of Allied submarine kills. The underlying principles, firing ahead of the ship, detonating on contact, and maintaining sonar tracking throughout the attack, remain embedded in modern anti-submarine doctrine. Contemporary rocket-launched depth bombs, from Russia's RBU-6000 to Western ASW systems, all trace their lineage back to the rotating launcher Gedive championed. But the deeper lesson lies in how the weapon overcame institutional inertia. The depth charge's 2% success rate was well known, yet the Navy clung to it because doctrine said it worked. Changing that mindset required persistent advocacy long before the combat results made the argument undeniable. Escort sailors seldom understood the technical details, but they saw the difference. Contacts that once slipped away now ended in wreckage and oil slicks. Convoys arrived more intact. Crews survived to sail another patrol. A nation that had once feared starvation regained the shipping lifeline it needed to endure and eventually win. Many factors contributed to that victory, but among them, earning a quiet place of honor, was a weapon officers once laughed at, until the Atlantic battlefield proved them wrong. The unassuming rotating drum had, in the end, reshaped the war.